Hi, I'm Mara. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm really excited. We have a great video for today. We're going to be making a quick sauce. A quick sauce is probably closest to like a marinara sauce. And it's just that. It's a fraction of the time that it would take to make a full meat sauce. Now, I love a good meat sauce just like anybody else, but sometimes I don't have the time or the ingredients to do that. So that's where the quick sauce comes in. It's absolutely wonderful. It's delicious. It's easy. If you've never made sauce before, it's a great sauce to start with. It's super versatile. You can use it on a pizza, pasta, chicken parm, eggplant parm, any of the parms. It's just wonderful. All right, so come on, let's see what we need. All right, so here's what we need for today. Tomatoes, of course. I like to use whole tomatoes. There's a couple reasons, but simply, when they process the tomatoes, they always reserve the highest quality tomatoes to leave whole versus crushed or pureed. Next, we need a nice, good quality olive oil, about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, about a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes, about a teaspoon of sugar. I'm using 3 cloves of garlic, and a little bit of fresh nutmeg. This I picked up from Nona. It's something she always adds in her sauce. It just gives a little subtle complexity to the sauce. It's not at all overpowering. You couldn't probably pick it out, but it just adds a little something in the background, which is very lovely. Now, as I always like to say, you're cooking for yourself and the people that you love. So make it how you like it. If you don't really like spice, you can add less red pepper flakes. If you like it, add a little more. If you just love garlic, go ahead and add more in. Or if you're not so crazy about it, a little less. You can really adjust these flavors based on how you like it and what your family and the people you love enjoy. Okay, let's cook. So I've poured my tomatoes into my blender. And one reason today that I'm only making 1 can of tomatoes for this sauce is because I want to show you the proportions for 1 can. That way it's always easily scalable. So no matter how large a batch you want to make, if it's 2, 3, 4 cans, you just scale up the ingredients accordingly. And that way you'll always have a somewhat consistent sauce. All right, so I'm going to add most of my ingredients here into the blender. I've poured my tomatoes in. Into that, I'm going to add my salt and sugar and the nutmeg. So you can see it's not too much, just a little bit we're adding in. Again, we don't want it to overpower, but just add a nice little depth of flavor. And I'm just gonna blend this on low for a few seconds. It does not take long at all. That's it. It's just that quick. Okay, so for today, we're gonna be leaving the garlic cloves whole. What could be easier than that? You just don't wanna eat them when the sauce is ready, so make sure you avoid them when you're plating your pasta. Just cut that right off. And then I take the flat part of my knife and just smash it a little to help release all the wonderful flavors. And that's it. Our garlic is ready to go. Okay, now we have all our ingredients prepped. It's time for the fun part. Let's cook. So I'm gonna put my heat on to a nice low heat. And to that, I'll add some olive oil. Nice, generous amount here. We'll let the olive oil heat for just a few seconds. You can see when it moves, it moves freely and easily. That means it's warming up. It moves slower when it's cold. So that looks perfect. We don't want it too hot. So what we're gonna do now is add our garlic, and We don't want to brown our garlic or burn it. We just want to sort of extract the flavor of the garlic, heat it through a little bit, and if we overcook the garlic, it changes the flavor completely. So we don't want the heat too high. We're going to add this in right now. All right, so I've adjusted my heat to medium-low. And I'm going to just keep a close eye on it because, again, I don't want it to burn. Okay, so you can see how that's just got a little bit of a sizzle to it, but not too much. It's very gentle. We don't want to overcook the garlic. We just want to extract all the beautiful, wonderful flavor. And at this point, I'm also going to add our red pepper flakes. I'm going to go ahead and flip the garlic now. And you can see that it has just a touch of color on it, but it's not brown. It's just got a little golden on it. That's really perfect. We don't want it any more than that. The second side will go even a little quicker. I'm going to lower it just a touch. All right, at this point, use your nose as well, and I'm really starting to get that beautiful garlic aroma. That's letting me know it's probably ready. So to that, I'm going to go ahead and add my tomatoes. I'm going to pour that right in. Just be careful, it can splatter a little bit because the tomato is hitting the oil. Give that a stir. I'm going to add just a little water to the sauce so it has a little room to cook down as the sauce cooks. Of course, the water will evaporate and thicken. What I like to do is I'm going to put a little water in here so I get all of my goodness out. And you can see it's not too much water, just a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing with my tomato can. Leave no tomato behind. And that's that. All right, I'm going to give that a stir. And I'm going to bring my heat up to medium high, just being careful not to burn the bottom. And we just want a nice, gentle simmer, just ever so gentle. And we're just going to let this cook until it reaches the consistency and flavor we want. Okay, so this has been cooking for about a half hour. As you can see, it is starting to thicken beautifully. Now I'm going to take this opportunity to show you what we want to look for to see if we need to make any adjustments in our flavors. So the first thing, of course, you have to do is give this a taste. Okay, so it's coming along beautifully. So there's a few things I'm looking for. First of all, we have to assess if it still needs to cook down more. Now, as I mentioned before, it still looked a little bit on the thin side, and when I tasted it, absolutely confirmed that. The flavors are great, it's tasting good, it's coming along wonderfully, but they're just still a little muted or watered down, the flavors. So that lets me know it needs to cook down a little more. Everything will just intensify and taste much better as it cooks. The other thing I'm always looking for, the biggest factor, is the acidity and the sweetness. That varies a lot from tomato can to tomato can. So that's something that almost always I need to adjust for at some point. So right now, my sauce isn't too terribly acidic, and it's not too bitter. So I'm not going to add any sugar just yet because it will sweeten up a little more as it continues to cook. Now, if you taste yours and it tastes way too acidic and way too bitter at this point, I would go ahead and add in a little bit of sugar, maybe a half a teaspoon to start with, taste it, and adjust. All right, so I've let it cook for another 25-30 minutes. And as you can see, it's cooked down beautifully. The consistency is right where I want it. You see the difference there. Thickened up, gorgeous. So I've tasted it, and I can tell I want to add just a little more sugar, so about maybe a half a teaspoon or so should do the trick. Always let it sit for a minute and then test again. Give the flavors time to incorporate before adding any more. All right, so I'm going to test that again. That tastes perfect. Absolutely perfect. I'm going to teach you a trick. This is not something that I do every time I make sauce. This is more of an emergency rescue. So if you're making sauce and the flavors are where you want it, you don't want it any sweeter, you've done all your tricks to try to help the sauce not be too acidic, but it's still just too acidic, and that sometimes is just how the tomatoes are. Okay, so I have developed a little trick, it's just some science, to neutralize some of those acids. Now, you have to be very, very careful, because if you add too much, you absolutely could ruin your sauce. Tomatoes are acidic, so a good sauce will have some acid to it. You don't want to neutralize all of it. But if it's just too much, and sometimes it's just too much, you can try this trick. It's super easy, and it absolutely works beautifully. So what I do is I take a pinch, and I mean a pinch, of baking soda. You do not want a lot of this. You might neutralize too much of the acid. You still want some. You don't want to change the flavor of it. This is just a little pinch to pull back some acidity if you have too much. So I put a pinch in there, just a pinch. You see that? Hardly any at all. You want to stir that up. Of course, it will fizz a little bit. Just give it a minute or two, and then test it again. And you'll be amazed with the transformation. It just cuts through a little bit of that acid to pull it back a little if it's too much. Like I said, this is not something you want to always put in your sauce. This is an emergency rescue. If it's just a little too acidic, you've already tried all your other tricks. So one of the last things you want to do is add in your fresh herbs. I always add fresh basil. It's my favorite. I love it in a sauce. So I'm going to go ahead and add my fresh basil in there. Let me give it a stir. And really, at that point, once you've added that in, you can go ahead and turn the heat right off and just let it sit in the warm sauce for a few minutes so that the flavors infuse. You really don't want to cook the fresh herbs. You just want it, the heat of the sauce to extract that flavor out of it. Now, you can add other herbs if you like. For me, this is all I need. If I'm making this for a pizza sauce, I might add in some oregano. If I'm having this with pasta, I prefer it without the oregano. But if you like it, add it in there, absolutely. I always use fresh basil. For me, there's no comparison between the fresh and the dried. The flavor's so much more intense, and it actually tastes quite different. Some herbs are great dried, and you don't necessarily need them fresh. Oregano is very strong, tastes great dried. I often use that dried, but for basil, for me, fresh is the way to go. I always have some growing in my garden. If you don't have any growing, you can pick it up at any grocery store. Okay, so it's that easy to make a wonderful, quick, delicious, homemade sauce. You never have to buy it from a jar again. This also freezes beautifully. So if you have any left over, if you make a slightly bigger batch, you can always freeze it, and that way you have it in a pinch for a weeknight meal or to use in another recipe. And check out my companion video to this one on how to cook, finish, and plate pasta like a pro. You absolutely will not believe the difference it makes in the final product. So for more tips, tricks, and recipes, please like and subscribe to In the Kitchen with Mara. See you in the kitchen.